We had been planning this camping trip for months, a long weekend getaway to escape the daily grind and enjoy the beauty of nature. Our group of five, Jake, Laura, Tim, Sarah, and I, were all eager to explore Redwood Forest, a place renowned for its towering trees and serene landscapes. Despite the rumors of strange sightings and eerie disappearances, we were determined to prove that there was nothing to fear. As we drove deeper into the forest, we couldn't ignore the turn-back signs and missing person posters plastered on trees. They were unsettling, but we laughed them off, attributing them to urban legends meant to scare tourists. We arrived at a secluded spot and set up camp, the dense canopy above providing a sense of adventure and isolation. That first night, as we sat around the campfire, Tim brought up the local legend of Bigfoot. "They say it's a giant, hairy creature that roams these woods," he said, his voice low and dramatic. "People claim to have seen it, but no one has ever gotten a clear picture, and then there are those who never come back." "Come on, Tim," Laura interrupted, rolling her eyes. "It's just a story. There's no such thing as Bigfoot." We all laughed, but there was an undercurrent of unease that none of us could shake. The next day, we decided to hike deeper into the forest. The trail was overgrown and barely visible, adding to the sense of mystery. As we walked, we stumbled upon more signs warning us to turn back, and missing posters that seemed eerily recent. "Maybe we should head back," Sarah suggested, her voice trembling slightly. "No way," Jake insisted. "We came here for an adventure, and that's what we're going to have." Reluctantly, we pressed on. By late afternoon, we found a small clearing and decided to rest. The air felt heavy, and the forest around us was unnervingly silent. As dusk approached, we started hearing strange noises, branches snapping, low growls, and something that sounded like distant footsteps. We tried to dismiss them as animals, but the fear in our eyes was unmistakable. That night, as we huddled around the campfire, the atmosphere grew tense. Every rustle in the bushes made us jump. Suddenly, Laura screamed and pointed into the darkness. "Did you see that? Something's out there." We all turned, straining to see through the inky blackness. A shadow moved between the trees, large and imposing. "It's just an animal," Jake said, trying to reassure us, but his voice wavered. We decided to take turns keeping watch, but exhaustion got the better of us. I awoke in the middle of the night to a blood-curdling scream. Sarah was gone, her sleeping bag empty. We grabbed our flashlights and frantically searched the area, calling her name, but there was no response. Panic set in as we realized the gravity of our situation. The next morning, we found traces of a struggle, footprints larger than any humans and tufts of coarse, dark hair. Our fear escalated to terror as we faced the reality that something, or someone, had taken Sarah. We decided to pack up and head back immediately, but the path seemed different, as if the forest itself was conspiring to keep us there. As we hurried back, we heard heavy footsteps following us. Tim, who was leading the group, suddenly disappeared with a scream, his flashlight dropping to the ground. We didn't dare to stop. We kept moving, adrenaline fueling our desperate escape. By the time we reached the edge of the forest, only Jake, Laura, and I remained. We stumbled out onto the main road, our bodies bruised and our minds shattered. We flagged down a passing car and were taken to the nearest town, where we recounted our horrifying ordeal to the authorities. Search parties were dispatched, but neither Sarah nor Tim were ever found. The legend of Bigfoot in Redwood Forest grew, and we became part of its dark lore. The forest had taken our friends, and though we escaped, we were never truly free from the haunting memories. To this day, I can't shake the feeling of being watched whenever I'm in the woods. We went into Redwood Forest seeking adventure, but we found something far more sinister. The missing posters and turn-back signs weren't just warnings. They were the last cries of those who ventured too far into the unknown. The trauma of that night stayed with us, altering our lives in ways we never anticipated. Laura couldn't sleep without the aid of medication and often woke up screaming from nightmares. Jake became obsessed with finding out what had taken our friends, spending countless hours researching Bigfoot sightings and disappearances in the area. I tried to move on, but the memory of those giant footprints and the inhuman growls haunted me. Jake's obsession led us back to Redwood Forest a year later. He had convinced Laura and me that we needed closure, that we needed to understand what had happened. More equipment, night vision cameras, sound recorders, and even a satellite phone for emergencies. The drive back was somber, each of us lost in our own thoughts, reliving the nightmare of our last visit. As we entered the forest, the familiar sense of dread washed over us. We reached the old campsite and set up our gear, but none of us could shake the feeling that we were being watched. As night fell, the forest became eerily silent again. We took turns monitoring the cameras and listening to the sound recorders, hoping to catch a glimpse or a sound of whatever had taken our friends. In the early hours of the morning, Laura saw something on the night vision camera. A large, shadowy figure moved swiftly between the trees, its eyes glowing faintly in the dark. We held our breath, watching as it seemed to circle our campsite, never coming too close but always staying just within sight. Jake, armed with a rifle, stood guard, his eyes darting around, ready for anything. Suddenly, the sound recorders picked up low growls and heavy footsteps. The ground vibrated with each step, and we realized that whatever it was coming closer. Jake aimed his rifle at the darkness, his hands shaking. "Show yourself," he yelled, his voice cracking with fear and desperation. The growling intensified, echoing through the trees. Out of the darkness, the creature finally emerged. It was massive, covered in thick, dark fur, and its eyes glowed with a malevolent intelligence. It looked at us, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. The creature let out a deafening roar, shaking the very air around us. Jake fired his rifle, but the creature barely flinched. It lunged at us, and in the chaos, we scattered, running for our lives. Laura and I managed to escape, but Jake wasn't as lucky. We heard his screams echoing through the forest, followed by an eerie silence. We ran until we reached the edge of the forest, collapsing onto the road, gasping for breath. A passing car stopped, and we were taken to safety, but we knew we had lost another friend to the darkness of Redwood Forest. Authorities once again searched the area, but like before, they found no trace of Jake. The forest seemed to swallow all evidence of our encounters, leaving only our broken and haunted testimonies. The local authorities dismissed our story, attributing the disappearances to wild animals or simple misadventure. No one believed in the creature that stalked Redwood Forest, but we knew the truth. Laura and I decided to never speak of that night again. We left Redwood Forest and tried to rebuild our lives, but the trauma never left us. The loss of our friends and the horror we witnessed became a silent burden we carried, an unspoken bond that connected us through our shared nightmare. Redwood Forest remained, its towering trees a testament to the darkness that lurked within. Years later, when I hear news reports of hikers disappearing in Redwood Forest, my heart aches. I want to warn them, to tell them to heed the turn back signs and missing person posters, but I know it won't make a difference. The forest has its own rules, its own darkness that defies explanation, and so I stay silent, hoping that one day the truth will be revealed and the souls lost to Redwood Forest will finally find peace.